Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and as you know now, because we're in our 22nd year, I interview artists about their craft, what they've done in the past, what they're working on, what they might have planned for the future. We often interview writers, poets, novelists, journalists, but we also cast a very, very wide net. We have had people on who act, who direct, who sculpt, who are musicians. We've even had one magician on. It's a very, very wide net. So if you have ideas for people who might be good guests for the Writer's Block, please watch for our address at the end of the program. Tonight, I'm happy to say we have a person of mixed talent who writes and sings and is very civically minded. She's very well known throughout Cape Ann. Her name is Daisy Nell. And born and bred dweller in Essex, the Queen of Essex. And she just informed me, I didn't know this, but that she has 5 grandchildren all together with she and her husband Stan. She is a musician, as many of you know. She plays the banjo, she plays the guitar, and she has a wonderful voice as well. She's been involved in many civic activities and is an educator in maritime history and a researcher in maritime history, and also a writer of a book that we're going to present now and then later in the show called The Stowaway Mouse. Welcome to the Writer's Block,
Thank
Daisy.
you, John.
Thank you for
that nice
down.
introduction. I do have to tell you that I have 4 grandchildren, unless you count the mouse.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got the number wrong.
That's fine.
4. I didn't want to.
No, I don't want to rush things here.
I don't want that to be news to
Exactly.
to your family out there. 4 grandchildren.
Yeah, one's brand new, 3 weeks old.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Again. Besides being a grandmother, you're very, very busy in, among other things, music.
Yes.
Now, before we went on, you mentioned that you started playing when you were 15
I did.
in high school.
I did. I performed.
How did you get into that?
Well, like a lot of people, I got bitten by the folk music bug back in the 60s. And that's when I was a young teenager. And folk music was it. I spent a summer on Martha's Vineyard where during the afternoons people would go and play guitars and hang out. And there were a lot of members of one family who played the guitar and sang. And we'd have hootenannies at night. And I needed to do that. I heard that music and I loved it. I had actually heard a lot of that at home. My dad used to love to play Pete Seeger and Burl Ives and the Weavers, and I loved the music. But this one family, whose last name was Taylor, sang together and harmonized, and I thought that was it. I really needed to do that. That actually turned out to be somebody who we knew as Jamie, later shortened to James. But he and his brothers and sisters would all harmonize together, and it was the beginning of a lifelong passion.
Is this Sweet Baby James Taylor?
That would be, yes. But he was a little older than I was, and he played way more than 3 chords, and still does.
So he broke that attitude of all you need is 3 chords and an attitude. that kind of
Right.
that kind of philosophy.
Yeah. Well, he was extremely talented back then, and but there was the love of it. The whole family and the community, everybody sang, and we'd have these music nights, and people of all ages would come out and play and sing. And from then on, I went back to school the next fall and had to have a guitar and had to learn. And back then, everybody taught each other. We'd sit around after school and, hey, I learned a new chord, And
So the guitar was your first instrument?
the guitar is what I learned first.
And did you sing always?
I always used the guitar and learned the chord method. Like a lot of people just learn to play by ear and use the guitar as a way to accompany singing. That it was through the door of singing that I needed to go to sing the folk music and learn it and collect it and eventually write.
Was there something in your family background that made you open to music, open to instruments, open to singing?
My father loved to play. He only knew 1 chord on the guitar, and but he loved to sing, and it didn't seem to matter to him that it was just 1 chord. So we used to just sing at home. And he was a great singer. My mother had musicians in her family, but she was a terrible singer, which, that's part of what you need in life, is you need someone to be in the audience.
So they didn't just listen to the Weavers, for instance.
Yeah,
They sang and,
sang along.
and participated.
Yeah. Oh, my father used to love songs like the Leather-Winged Bat and ballads. So I developed a love of that. And in the 60s, it was a great time because there was a lot of it around. And I just sopped it right up and became interested in playing out and singing and performing, because there was a place where that could happen right nearby in Ipswich. A lot of people probably remember the King's Rook. And that was where we all tried to get permission from our parents to go. I was way too young to go out at night, but at 14, I was able to go with a friend, and some of my friends from school. We would go there, and I remember how absolutely shocked I was to see my history teacher in the audience as well. And I thought, boy, I don't know if I dare tell my parents, but
where was that in Ipswich?
In Ipswich, right. Everybody in your audience probably remembers this with fond memories. The King's Rook was just in an old building. It was in a barn of a building just before Choate Bridge in Ipswich. And the man that ran it, Gardner Damon, added on. It was so popular. It was enormously popular. And they had great, well-known performers there like Tom Rush and Dave Van Ronk and the Jim Kweskin Jug Band. But they also had Hoot Night. And that's where I first played.
Is that where the jungle offices are now?
Across the street.
On the other side?
It's where the real estate office is, Caldwell Banker is in there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But there was a great crowd, mixed ages, mixed everything. It became the North Shore's answer to what was going on in Boston. We'd have performers who were, I say we, I felt like I owned the place, but I was only 14, 15 years old. But the people who were there and hung out down there, it was good. It was safe. It was about the music. And everybody there was as passionate as, watching Chris Smither and the Jug Band and Tom Paxton. And little did I know, fast forward to well into my 40s when I married Stan, my husband Stan Collinson. He was in a group that played on a regular basis down there. So a lot of people got their start right here in this little neat scene in Ipswich.
I'm sure, as you say, a lot of our audience will remember
I bet they
where
do.
it is. But
Yeah.
those who can remember the word hootenanny will be the same ones who remember.
Right, now we say open mic.
Where the Rook is.
And it's called acoustic music, or
Yes.
roots music.
Right.
But in those days, so I played down there, and then in school, I played and sang. Whenever there was a talent night, I was out there with my guitar. Whenever there was a fair, I did the strolling minstrel thing. I have a picture of myself strolling through the Christmas fair, playing the guitar and singing, back when I was 15.
When did you pick up the banjo?
Well, the banjo I can blame on Stan. When I got together with Stan in 1996, he had a banjo, an old Fairbanks banjo in the attic, and he gave it to me and said, you have this name, it sounds like you were born in Appalachia. You should learn how to play the clawhammer banjo. And it was an open back banjo. And I'd always loved it, always wanted to learn it. And as much as I love bluegrass, I never wanted to learn that style of banjo playing. I probably couldn't play it. People who play bluegrass banjo tell me that learning clawhammer is just as hard. So I went through the whole learning curve of learning how to frail.
And this is as an adult,
Yeah,
not a young
Well,
teenager.
I think it's probably easier to learn if you haven't played the guitar, because the clawhammer stroke is the opposite of how you strum the guitar. So it's sort of like learning how to type the correct way after you've learned how to hunt and peck. But anyway, I did learn,
And now you have to go back and forth.
yeah, but that's okay. I do all the time, and I'm nuts about it. I love it, and I suffer through all the jokes, and that's okay. I'm the greatest teller of banjo jokes too, so I don't mind. I'm proud to be a banjo player, and
Do you have a
love it.
quick banjo joke?
Not that I can say on television.
Okay, fair enough. I'll check with you after we go off the air.
Well, sure. Now that I've mentioned grandchildren in a children's book, I'm certainly not going to tell you an off-color joke.
Now, I want to begin talking about a project of yours that combines writing,
Yes.
music, and your maritime background and love. And I'm going to hold the book up. It is called The Stowaway Mouse. And it is a beautiful book, a children's book about a mouse who hides out on the schooner Ardell. Can you tell us something about where you got the idea and when you got the idea and how it evolved?
Last year, exactly at this time, Labor Day of last year,
Fall of
of
2010?
2010, I'm the chair of the Gloucester Schooner Festival. And one of the events that was kind of like a postscript to the schooner parade and the schooner races on Sunday, on the Monday of Labor Day, there was a frame-up gathering over in Essex at the Shipbuilding Museum, next door actually, Harold Burnham's yard, where the frames were put in place for this new schooner that he was building to be named after his grandmother, Ardell Burnham. And he had built the Lannon, and he was going to join the charter trade himself. And we were there, of course, and signed the keel like a lot of other people. And a couple of weeks later, I was due to start my fall folk music series at the Essex Elementary School's second grade. So I decided that for a theme for these kids, I would talk about Essex and its shipbuilding history. And the way I work my residency there is in 8 weeks' time, I teach them about folk music, folk instruments. I bring in some guests and friends who play different instruments so they see a variety of folk instruments and develop a little repertoire of traditional folk songs. And then we talk about how old traditions can still be heard in all over the town, all over their lives. You can hear and folk music, but you can also see old boats, old houses, old tools, old people, and learn a lot and build on that and create something new. So from that, we talked about songwriting and the creation of a song. And there were 2 second grades, so we were going to write 2 songs. And I say we, meaning I would talk about the song form, say different song forms like a ballad or a song with a verse and a chorus or a repeating line. And sometimes it's gibberish like Philome Ori Orie, and sometimes it has a nonsense chorus. But whatever, they got it. And over the years, I've developed this program where they understand that there are different song forms, and there's no better sponge than the mind of an 8-year-old, ready to take it all in. And so when it came time to compose something new in the style of a traditional song, I talked about the schooner Ardell and told them to make sure they get their parents to drive them down the causeway and see this pile of wood taking shape. And I would draw pictures on the board, and we'd talk about it, and we'd talk about what song we're going to write. And the day it was time to get ideas from them, I put the premise out there. Now that they knew that the things that looked like ribs were really the ribs of a ship, and they understood what a frame was, and that the vessel was going to be launched and what was going to happen when she was launched, they had to become believers in this because it was still a very raw pile of lumber down there. So I said, well, what if on the day that the Ardell is launched, a mouse climbs up the cradle and sneaks in through the scuppers. Now they know what a scupper is by now, and hides out. What would the mouse do? What would the mouse see? And what do you think would happen? So we made a big list.
So this is a collaboration?
Yes, a big list of all the things that might happen. Now, they had some great ideas. They had some not so great ideas. They had some ideas that I could never use.
Well, the book would probably be this big if you
Right,
used them all. Right?
yes, and it had to be a song. So I explained to them that I was going to take all their ideas, and I was going to take whatever came out of me in my head, and I was going to put it all together, and a song would be created, and I couldn't tell them anything more, but that it was as if I were going to take all the ingredients they brought, and I was going to make a great big cake. And if something didn't quite go with the cake and it was going to taste terrible, it might not get used.
That's a great introduction. I want to mention that the book comes with a CD, which is not here because Andrew is about to play it for us. We're going to listen to the CD of Daisy Nell singing the song of the Stowaway Mouse. We're going to listen to the first couple minutes of the Stowaway Mouse so that you can get a sense of the flavor and the lilt and the delicacy and the fun of this musical book that combines writing and music. So here are the first couple of minutes of the CD that comes with the Stowaway Mouse, Daisy Nell singing the song.
There were people gathered all around to see the new schooner in this old town. Down by the river, ready to go out to the bay where the oceans do flow. There was a little mouse, but people couldn't see him. He lived inside of the Essex Museum. He never went farther than he dared. He was a little mouse and he was scared. So many had come to see the new boat, to see her splash and see her float. Built brand new and named Ardell, the sight she'd see no one could tell. Wind and whales and waves that splash, sun and rain and lightning flash. The mouse took a breath and 1, 2, 3, he scampered up the frame and off to sea. Oh no, what are you going to do now that you become a member of the crew? Oh no, where are you going to go? Heading off to sea where the big winds blow. No one saw him, he was on board. He scurried down below where the food was stored. He found a pair of the captain's shoes and crawled right in for a little snooze. He woke up feeling a stream of air blowing through the boat, right through his hair. He ran and hid in the coffee pot, and there was the captain tying up a knot. The boat was rocking back and forth, heading out to sea, east by north. The mouse was hungry, but he was afraid. He saw a crate of apples that he could raid. He took a little bite, and it went crunch, and that was the end of the mouse's lunch. The captain hollered and he did yell, "Mates, we got a Mickey on the schooner Ardell."
Very good. I know that everybody enjoyed that. I'd like to ask you to kind of augment that, if you would read this little section where the captain, who turns out to be a pretty nice fellow,
Oh,
says
the
that
captain.
he's going to bring the mouse back
Right.
home.
The music ended, I think, where the captain discovers that this mouse is on board, and then the mouse has to run and hide, and he runs all over the place. And one of the places he hides is underneath the captain's hat. So the captain said then, in a voice so low, "Hey, little mousie, back home you go. You see, this voyage was our practice run, but I'll have to send you packing when the day is done. You would never get away from my old cat, and I can't keep you under my hat. But now you have a story forever to tell. For a day you were crew on the schooner Ardell."
Very nice, very nice. I want to emphasize that the graphics in the book, the illustrations, are wonderfully done by a gentleman by the name of George Ulrich. And I'm going to hold up the cover again and then show a couple of internal pictures. And maybe you can tell us
great.
about George and how you collaborated with him.
This was such a piece of serendipity, John. It was amazing.
Here's-
When I woke up one morning after I wrote this and took it back to the kids and said, "Here's the song." A couple of mornings later, I said, this would make a children's book, because I can just see if somebody could just capture these images, ideas, and put them into a book, I could really make a book out of this. And, the more I thought about it, the more I really liked the idea. And a guy who was a volunteer, who really did a lot of work helping to build the Ardell, said, "You need an illustrator, and I've got just the guy." And it turned out, he said, his name is George Ulrich. And I said, "Well, what's he going to be like to work with? I don't even know him." He said, "Yes, you do. You know George. He comes to all your concerts." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, when you see him, you'll know him." And so he said, "I'm going to send him over to see you." So he sent George over, and I gave George a copy of the lyrics and a little homemade CD of the song. And the next day, he sent me a drawing. And I was blown away. I saw my image of this mouse and the boat and everything, and there it was on paper.
And there's the captain with the mouse dwelling in his head.
Yeah, they're great pictures, and the cover, look at that, I know everyone saw that cover on the screen for a while.
Beautifully illustrated.
And I have to tell you, the Ardell was supposed to be green, and he assured us that she was going to be a green schooner, but at the last minute, Harold had a brilliant idea, and I must say, the Ardell is gorgeous, but she's gray. and he said, "Well, that's okay. The captain in the book has white hair, and Harold has brown hair." So he said a few changes here and there.
What changed his mind about the green color?
Well, I think he just, first of all, from a practical standpoint, it's much easier to take care of a boat that's a light color, because as you know, the sun will beat down harder on a dark color and dry the boat out. So she's a gorgeous seagull gray and white with a pretty cherry stripe, and right here in Gloucester now. I mean, the boat happened, the book happened. We all got launched about June of 2011, and these kids in Essex, who could very easily have just driven by and maybe looked and maybe not looked, and their parents, I have to say, their parents they'll never forget it. And that's really why I did it.
It sounds like a wonderful experience, the whole process. I want to make sure our audience knows how they can get a copy of The Stowaway Mouse.
Well, it's here in Gloucester at the where the Ardell is sailing from what up until last week we called Gloucester Maritime Heritage Center is now called Maritime Gloucester. That's in Harbor Loop. And it's for sale in that gift shop. It's for sale on board the Ardell. It's for sale at the bookstore in Gloucester, and in Essex at the Shipbuilding Museum, and Gaybrook Garage, which stands in my business. And
is there a website?
There's a website. There's supposed to be a website for the book, which, like a lot of great ideas, hasn't quite come to fruition yet. It's up, sort of. So the best thing for me to do is direct people to my website, which is daisynell.com.
daisynell.com. That's easy.
Right. That's easy to remember.
One word.
One word, and there's no E in Daisy. It's just like the flower.
DAISYNELL, an Appalachian name, as Stan calls it.
That's right.
I just got the 5-minute signal from Alex, so I'm going to have to begin to close up. I want to ask you a quick question. What's next for Daisy Nell, say in 2012? What's the next project?
Well, I'm just shocked and surprised and delighted at the reception this book has received. So I'm beginning to get more requests for signings, which can sometimes be a gig for the band. I'm playing at the Waterfront Festival in New Bedford in this fall, and that's going to include a book signing. So next year I'll probably do more. I'm probably not going to do another children's book right away, but boy, the ideas for sequels are coming in.
There'd have to be another launch. Any more schooners on the waves?
I don't know. Someone wanted me to write one for the Maine school children called The Stowaway Moose.
Good sequel.
Bigger boat.
Bigger book, too, I bet. Huh? Daisy Nell, thank you very much for being on the Writer's Block.
Well, thank you for having me.
Appreciate you coming down after a long day of work.
Oh,
it's great to have you here.
Thanks so much.
I want to thank all our viewers in TV land for being with us, too. And before I close, I want to add one little remark. A play that started in Gloucester a few years ago and then went to Boston called The Yates Game is going to open in New York in February of 2012. I'd like you to find more out about that at theyatesgame.org. Just a little parenthetical close there. If you've learned something about Daisy Nell's banjo playing, her guitar playing, her singing, her maritime work, and this wonderful book, The Stowaway Mouse, then the Writer's Block has done its job tonight. Thank you for being with us, and I hope to see you again next week on the Writer's Block. Good night.